Right, first fail. I tried really hard to make the CD versus CD, but I couldn't come up with anything. So we got continuous delivery and copious regulations. So I guess the big question, can we really achieve, especially after Banos's talk, continuous delivery in a highly regulated world of financial services? Yes, thank you, and good night. Okay, I'll add some more. Right. Is it easy to achieve continuous delivery in the highly regulated world of financial services? That's all I'm going to go with. Maybe. Yes, possibly. Not easy. So, me. Okay, so I'm Ian. I am the controversially titled Head of DevOps at Callcredit. Much fun was had on Twitter talking about whether that was the right title or not. For right now, it's a very useful label to stick on a piece of transformational work we're trying to do. I'll go with that. Probably to be rebranded at a later date. Okay. I have, for reasons that made sense at the time, decided to represent my career as mugs. So I started out as a developer, a database monkey to be specific. I then moved into the heady, exciting world of DBAs, connected to my pager, swearing at these guys I used to work with for breaking my servers now. I didn't do it when I was a developer, obviously. I then moved into a team lead position, leading snowflakes. And I am now head of. See what I've done there? Okay, there you go. So, okay, quick history lesson. Callcredit. 16 years ago, there were two big credit reference agencies. They both began with E. The Skipton Building Society decided it would be an interesting thing to see if we could set up another one. Almost certainly doomed to failure. Much to some people's surprise, and after a few years of hemorrhaging money, it suddenly started working, and the company has pretty much been through 12, 13 years of sustained growth. Fairly linear as well, and that line keeps going in the same direction. So we've grown from nothing to a relatively large company, about 1,500 people, split across Leeds, London, Manchester. We've got quite large offices in Lithuania. Worth a visit if anyone hasn't been there, very pleasant. Although everyone's really tall, I feel short there. Okay, so new owners came in about 3 years ago, Americans, with very aggressive plans to continue that line, which is getting, as you'll imagine, anyone with any kind of business involvement will know that line gets harder and harder to maintain. And they were going to double the size of the business in the next 4 years. So we needed to go from where this little guy was running really fast to keep more or less where we were, and into something that's, you know, moving in a few more dimensions. So we weren't quite at the place where we were a massive bank with hundreds of years of legacy behind us, thank goodness. We did have 16 years of legacy behind us, and you can build up a certain amount in that time, trust me. So looking at the transformational piece, the question was, I guess at the time, from my kind of head of DevOps role, how close could we actually get to these unicorns? Or are we still the immovable barge instead? So, who is watching? So I think Banos again referred to this. There's a lot of regulations around financial institutions. So like the banks, so as a credit reference agency, our job is to collect data from all the banks, aggregate it out, and send out back to them. Okay, so we kind of hold pretty much the same information they do. So from a data perspective, we're not really very different. The three main bodies looking at us, and hopefully people are aware of at least some of these. Start with the ICO. That's kind of obviously the body that regulates all of us. Doesn't matter if you've got any data at all, those guys are interested in it and how you look after it. The PCI, Security Standards Council. So again, anyone who is working with or storing credit card or other card data will be very aware of PCI and their fun audits. And the FCA, the biggie for us. So this is the Financial Conduct Authority. So these are the guys who really wield the big stick. Okay, so what are the actual regulations that these guys are looking at and enforcing? So, Data Protection Act, really basic. Most of us come into contact with this every day. We'll almost certainly sign things to regulate the use of personal data. Okay, so personal data can be your name, your address, your email address, your phone number. And it's for individuals, so not organizations, for individuals who are alive, and that is a key point. And any other personal information associated with that comes into the control of the data controller, and that's kind of the term they use for the person who is responsible for looking after the data and answering for the DPA. The DPA for the ICO can raise fines of, I think, up to about $500,000 if you're not looking after the data properly and you're leaking it, or you're publishing random people's names and addresses on the internet, or someone's publishing it for you, more likely. Okay, GDPR. This will be less familiar to probably almost everyone, including myself. So this is new. This is a kind of brand new Europe-wide regulation, a brand new Europe-wide Data Protection Act. But we're leaving Europe, I hear you say. No, it still sticks, sorry. So this will come into force in, I think, April of 2018, okay? I can't tell you much about it because it's not clear what it's going to be like yet. It's just going to be slightly tougher than the DPA and across Europe. So this will be a challenge, certainly for us and other companies storing data over the next couple of years, when the regulations finally get flattened out and we all get told you've got 12 months to bring yourself in line or you're going to get fined. Brexit or no Brexit. I think the main changes are around the accountability for protecting the data. Other than that, it's looking similar to the DPA. PCI DSS. Goal, protecting cardholder data. Very simple. So again, anyone who is processing, working with, storing cardholder data, and again, that can be sort codes, account numbers, credit card numbers, comes under this, and their audits. So normally you'll get an annual audit around PCI DSS to make sure you are correctly looking after and segregating your data. It was simple one for this. Again, it's not fines we have to worry about so much as failing the audit. If we fail the audit, we can't store the cardholder data. We don't have a business. Fairly final. There are probably fines as well, but it's less important when we don't have a business. And finally, the FCA. So the FCA came into existence around 2013 after some bad stuff happened in 2008, 2010, I believe. So their goal, and this might allude to what went on, is to make financial markets work well for individuals, businesses, large and small, and for the economy as a whole. Bankers. Excuse my language. So yeah, the FSA was deemed not to have been doing its job after a whole bunch of bad stuff got screwed up. People fixing foreign transfer rates and stuff happened, and off the back of that, the biggest fine I think ever came from the FCA, and is also the biggest fine that has ever been levied in this country on a financial institution, which was I think around £290 million for the employees of the companies who were caught fixing foreign exchange rates, which they used a chat room for, apparently. So I was reading about it. It's like, way to cover your tracks, guys. Okay, so they are by far the main concern for us. They have the strictest regulations and they have the ability to levy as big a fine as they want, basically. Okay, so armed with the knowledge of where we wanted to get, we're going to be the financial Spotify, whatever that means, and armed with the constraints we know, with the regulations, having read the book as well, important, read the book. Let's do this, right? Let's just go on, we're going to do this. So I went to the various leaders from the business, from the sales teams, from the marketing team. Again, it all works better, whoever said it earlier, when the other teams are getting involved and understanding it as well. I said, guys, this is what we're going to do. And wasn't an overwhelmingly positive response the first time I mentioned continuous delivery, oddly. In fact, what I got was a long list from everyone from the head of business analysts, the IT director, the operational director, as to why we couldn't do this. So let's go through a few of the reasons why we can't do this. I talked about continuous delivery, and I'm fairly sure the first time I spoke about it, this is what everyone imagined. I'm also fairly sure they were thinking continuous deployment, okay? So what they were saying was, our clients don't want you deploying 10 times a day. The big banks don't want that. That'll upset them. They get upset with change more than once a month. Once a year, some of them. Continuous delivery, as I hope everyone is okay with, isn't that. Is everyone okay with the fact that continuous delivery and continuous deployment are two different things? Okay, cool, excellent. I assumed because of the name of the meetup everyone was. Excellent. That's the first thing we can't do. We can't change stuff too often, apparently. We definitely, all the unicorns, it's all cloud-based. It's cloud this, cloud that. You can only do the cloud. If you want to do continuous delivery, it's got to be cloud, right? So we cannot put our data in the cloud. Impossible. Just can't happen. The ICO almost certainly specifically says you can't put data in the cloud. I'm paraphrasing a bit, slightly. The fact that at that time, several of our largest clients and the biggest banks already had their data in the cloud seemed to pass people by. It's the cloud, not the cloud. Possibly. We do have, to be fair, much as I hate to be, a bunch of old legacy contracts that have some clauses that made sense when data centers were the only way of doing things, and when we come to look at maybe cloud, then it gets differently, to the point where some of them have named data centers in, which is an odd contract to have signed. But again, when you're growing from, and again, a lot of the challenges we have come from growing from a tiny company. When I joined, 14 years ago, there was maybe 100 people, and it's now in 1,500 people, and it grows quickly, stuff changes quickly. Those contracts, people do the right thing at the right time to keep the money in and keep the company growing. The other big challenge is everyone's favorite obstacle, the monolith. And we have some absolute doozies. We have some very, very large databases, multiple terabytes of big databases, not big databases, but big databases. The other one would have been easier problems to sort, actually. Of which, when you look at them, there's a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of actual toxic data that we need to worry about. The rest of it is metadata, it's audit data, it's log data, but because it's all in one big bundle, we have to treat at the moment it all together. Therefore, we can't do continuous delivery. So, what does all this mean for technology choices for us? So we've got a whole bunch of challenges coming from a whole bunch of areas. I'm still positive. Anyone who has ever met me knows I'm optimistic in the face of all reality at all times. So, the big difference for me between startups, smaller companies, I guess people with less financial data, around technology choices, is when you're doing that sort of small scale stuff, the question is, right, can we use that? Why not? Whereas in this highly regulated world, the question is, why? And that's probably the right question, to be honest. You know, we have to be careful. I'd rather the FCA didn't close us down. However, it turns out the FCA are really quite reasonable. One of the biggest challenges I think I had in putting together this little talk was actually getting to the nub of where a lot of the "we must do this" came from. And I think Manos covered a lot of it, and I wanted to ask at the time. So security says you must do this. Why? And I've got a long way in life by asking that question a lot. I've also had a lot of kick-ins for the same reason, from a business perspective, but never let it stop you. So again, why? There's a lot of stuff that goes, yes, no, we read these rules and that's how we've interpreted them. And generally, there aren't any rules that say, do things in a very specific way. Don't use cloud, do this way. So the FCA guidelines pretty much explicitly treat the cloud as just outsourcing. It's no different, okay? With this bit, our aim is to avoid imposing inappropriate barriers to firms' ability to outsource to innovative and developing areas, while ensuring that risks are appropriately identified and managed. So again, the FCA is there, at the end of the day, their absolute laser focus is don't screw over the consumer. Okay, so look after all of you and me, protect us from people doing bad things that aren't good for us. So that's all they care about. So the cloud is actually outsourcing, and what that means is the same as if you outsource something. So anything I take off of me that I am responsible for and give to another company and go, there you go, you're going to run that bit for me, I am still responsible for it. When someone comes and audit me and goes, is that done right? I can't just go, well, it's their problem, because it isn't. It's still my problem. It's still beholden on us to make sure that they're doing it right. Pass that audit along, basically. The cloud is no different from that. Which, in the world I'm currently in, it's not IBM, actually it's Microsoft. So there's, as we started to move this forward and get some buy-in, Microsoft makes stuff easier, and this is an interesting way into doing these things for us. So because there is this almost implicit trust in these big enterprise companies, and we see ourselves, I think, as a medium enterprise now. I didn't say okay Google, did I? No one ever got fired for buying Microsoft. So there's an immediate, right, let's use a cloud provider, Azure. What? That happens. That's kind of okay. And it's not just that. The other way, Microsoft, being late to the game as always, but very clever, have also seen that niche and put a huge amount of effort into selling themselves as this trusted partner. So if I went to Google and said, give me some servers, they go, help yourself. What do I get for that? Some servers, help yourself. Whereas Microsoft have done huge amounts of work as to make Azure the most comprehensive compliance coverage of any cloud provider. And that really is a massive selling point for organizations like us, for the banks. It does make it easier to start moving into that world. It's not to say you then have to stay in that world. You've kind of then proven the cloud is a thing. It can be done securely. On this occasion, Microsoft's done all the hard work for us. They've gone and talked to the FCA. They talked to the ICO, and they've done those deals, and they've talked about it and what that means for us. So that's quite nice. My favourite slide ever. I had so much fun putting this one together. Realistically, for us, hybrid cloud is probably almost the answer. It's never going to be put all your stuff in the cloud. It is still a much easier answer if we can unthread that toxic thread of data out of the monolith and keep that somewhere that we can go, there you go, it's there, it's in that data center, we've got our segregated networks around it, it's all encrypted at rest and in transmission. Don't go and talk to Microsoft, we have control of that. Currently, that's an easier proposition, that's an easy first step. We can then go, right, and we can put our front-end services, our web services, our applications even. Again, as long as all the data's encrypted as we go, that's a much easier discussion with companies like the PCI DSS audits and the FCA when we tell them what we're doing. The other challenge came last year. So, has everyone heard of Safe Harbour? Yeah. Damn it. So it's a really nice agreement whereby us and America, Europe and America agreed that we'd agree the same rules and it was all fine. We didn't have to set up a handshake contract every single time we wanted to move data from here into America, and that was fine. So that made it easier to use some of the cloud services because we didn't really have to worry about where the data was. It was in this region, and if that went wrong, it could quite easily run in North America region. That's fine, not a problem, until that got declared invalid in October of last year. And apparently Safe Harbour isn't. So kind of the knock-on effect currently is if you wish to store your data somewhere in North America, you have to have a specific contract in place with them going, yes, we'll adhere to all the data protection rules that Europe has, which will be the GDPR, which is a bit of a faff, to be honest. Now, I'm sure Europe are working on another broader thing. Whether we'll be part of that or not, I don't know. But the easy answer is what Microsoft did last year, which is go, that's a nuisance. Good job, we're massively rich. We'll build 2 data centers in the UK for you. Again, another example of how they have seen that market and have gone, right, we know what you need. We understand enterprises. We understand the way these governance bodies work. We can help you with that. So there we are. I had this conversation with my CTO actually a few weeks back, and he said, oh yeah, well no, we looked at other cloud providers again, but obviously Microsoft have built the 2 data centers, so that's, we'll stay with those for now. And I was, I'm sure I read something at the end of last year and while Microsoft were the first, AWS actually weren't far behind. So Amazon now provide a UK region. I think it's all in London, possibly in 2 data centers. It's entirely possible it's in the 2 data centers that we actually use for our hosted data centers. So AWS, so if people are now going to me, oh yeah, we're using Microsoft because of this, I now have, well actually, the Amazon services give us the same thing. There's still an inherent distrust of an online bookshop versus Microsoft, the enterprise, which we'll get over eventually. Okay, free. Everyone likes software like Elastic because it's free, right? Not so much. So open source stuff is absolutely great. What we have is, again, from a regulatory perspective, we have to have relevant support for the stuff we use. So what we can't have, and what people like the FCA don't like, is us going, what's your plan if the company you got that from goes bust? Or what's your plan if your system goes down? Who are you gonna get for help? We need to be able to go, these guys here, we have a contract in place. So we have an ELK instance. This has revolutionized our world. It's been brilliant. We're now throwing all the logs into it to the point where we filled it up and now need to work out how to scale it out. Has everyone else done that? Yeah, cool. I didn't think it was just us. But effectively, for every project we have that is using Elastic, that's a 50 grand cost in terms of licensing and support for, I don't know, a dozen nodes or whatever. So again, open source ain't so free in our world. So it's another consideration. So it's not always cheaper to go with the free option. We have a lot of metadata. So again, data storage is absolutely one of our big challenges. And on-premise storage, as you get into SANs and massive redundancy, and they get very expensive if we've got SSDs in there as well, it gets ludicrously expensive for the terabytes of data, most of which is audit data, is logged data. So we have to keep an audit trail of every single person who comes and asks us for information, because that then impacts on the information we give back next time. So that very quickly builds up into a really large amount of data. Most of it is abstract and not personal data. So again, if we can go to that hybrid model, we can start to look at being able to have stuff in the cloud, to be able to scale things a bit more easily. Cool. So, off the back of all this, I'm going to make this sweeping statement that continuous delivery drives excellent behaviours from a regulatory compliance perspective. It is absolutely our target state, and off the back of it, it is going to make our life a million times easier. Oh, you get faster, better deployments as well, which is nice. The biggie for me, and I'll run through a bit of some of the reasons why, don't worry, I'm just going to make the sentence and go, yeah, we're done. So, FCA, segregation of duties. So this is probably the most complicated, the biggest challenge we have. So, where possible and appropriate, blah, 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 a firm should segregate the duties of individuals and departments in such a way as to reduce the opportunities for financial crime. And this one they are quite specific on. For example, the duties of front office and back office staff should be segregated. Basically so that someone can't write the code, pull it through the whole pipeline, deploy the code, steal the data from live. So we've got gates basically. It's a different person is writing the code, deploying the code, is able to access the data in live. Okay? So this kind of, going back to our unicorns, this stops us being able to do that whole legendary full stack engineer. Being able to be the guy who writes the code, deploys the code and supports the code. Which, you know, that's a good thing. It makes you, if you're going to have to be woken up in the morning to support the code, you're going to write better code, hopefully. And for me, leads to a different, this is a bit of a segue really, and I'm going to talk about people briefly. Not that Matthew would be angry if I didn't, he would just be disappointed, which is worse. So enterprise DevOps for me isn't that end-to-end person, it's a bunch of very clever specialized people working well together. And I think that's almost better, because, you know, collaboration is supposed to be the heart of DevOps, right? So what we have, yeah, rock and roll into it somewhere. How autonomous an autonomous team? So, can we get to those unicorn rock and roll? There's your rock star DBAs and other annoying phrases that got used some years ago to be autonomous. So we can't do the thing, say, where we write the code and deploy the code. The technology constraints and the segregation of duties don't let that happen. With a focus on continuous delivery though, the tools that we're looking at make that considerably less of a problem. And we can get the people into the team to be able to do it. So while we have our developers and they can't deploy code, if they can just push it into your deployment tool, deploying is pressing a button, it's less of an issue. If you put the operations guy in the team, because that's still okay, you've segregated the duties, but it doesn't mean you can't talk to each other and work together and talk about what's coming through. That's also fine, and deployment is pressing a button, so we don't care who does the deploying really. So I can give that to the delivery manager or the change manager or whatever. So while we can't necessarily have our rock and roll unicorn team, we can have one that maybe looks a bit more like that. They're not as pretty, but you know, the outcome still rocks, right? Okay. Speaking of those tools, traceability. So, Non-repudiation and accountability. We have to ensure that a personal system that processed the information cannot deny their actions. So this is basically just auditing everything. So again, if we do have malicious code written and finds its way through, we need to be able to trace all the way back to where it came from. This is our deployment tool, the lovely Octopus Deploy, which is beautiful and simple. And I walked our head of audit through this earlier this year. And she's now my best friend. All of a sudden, we are the good guys. We've had nothing but banging heads with her team all last year. And we showed her this, and it was like, wow, that's amazing. And if I click on this, what can I see? Well, you can see all the things that happened and who pressed the button and who authorized the OK. It's amazing. So it's a good way to make friends and influence people and make our life easier. So again, I've made her life easier, and in turn, that's clearly addressing the regulations that she's there to enforce. Obviously, way down the other end of repudiation is source control. Source controlling all the things, software, obviously, but environments as well. And you can do that whether it's in the cloud, or you almost have to if it's in the cloud. You've got your lovely infrastructure as code. But you can do that in data centers and on-premise as well. So we've got orchestration engines building VMs and deploying to them in an absolutely known way. Which makes security happy too. Restricting access to cardholder data. So that's the main central tenet of the PCI audit, is to make sure only people who really need it get access to the data. The more tools in terms of deployment we do, and access goes away. Who has access to it? No one. I have a dream of a day where we don't have even the sysadmins able to RDP onto a server. We will keep the password in a safe behind a break the glass box, obviously just in case, but that's the target state, and that makes things like the PCI audit incredibly easy. They come in and go, right, where's your data? We go, it's there. Who can access that? Almost no one except this one system that can push things out. So, and it's a computer, it won't read it. So continuous delivery making audits much, much easier. Patching. So again, people like the FCA want us to make sure we're up to date with patches. If there's a day zero issue comes out, well, we can just press the button and deploy stuff through really nice and easily and get things done quickly. So that's when speed matters. And even in the banking world, where 9 months turnaround is clearly the norm for some things, you can't be doing that if you've got a real security concern with an online application or something like that. Standardization. Most audits are along the lines of, are you doing what you've told us you do? So for the FCA, we have to make a submission and say, these are the things we are doing to meet your criteria. Nice and easy. They will go, yep, that's fine. They will then come along and check you are. So the more standard things are, the easier it is to have that conversation. Are you doing that thing? Yep. What about over there? It's exactly the same over there. So all of our servers look the same because they're all built through the same route. They're all built using the same templates, the same JSON templates, the same orchestration engine build from the same image. However you build them, keep things more or less the same. Audits kind of, they go away. And starting to look at immutable infrastructure. And I guess that takes the standardization just a step further. So not only is it standard, but I also know no one's logged onto it and caused, what's the euphemism, drift. I've been screwing with it. So yeah, containers and things give you a lot of benefits and a lot of pain as well. But one of the big ones is, I know exactly what that looks like. It looks, the same. So, one word of advice for anybody, even if you're not working in the financial industry in the slightest, if you're a funky, cool startup, still treat all your data as if you are likely to be regulated. It will pay dividends later on. Even if you're not, treat it in that way. Make sure you've got everything audited, everything understood. If you have, start to build up amounts of what I call toxic data, personal data, card data at the extreme. Make sure you put it somewhere, segregate it off, keep it safe. But even if not, yeah, treat all your data as if you're about to be audited by the FCA and their massive stick. You'll thank me for it later. Okay.